Thank you, Scott. All right, so tonight we're on lesson 4, which covers Proverbs chapter 4. Before we get into it, somebody just give me a brief summary, of what they thought of the lesson, kind of what the main highlights they got from it. Okay, good. What else?
Still the idea of two choices, wisdom or folly.
Good. Yep, there are choices in there. When I was reading through it, it popped out to me that you have an admonition trying to get somebody to listen to, right? Says that, we'll go through it, but there's several times in there where he points out, listen, heed my words. You have choice to take a pathway of wisdom, pathway of wickedness, and then you have some practical advice that is given. They're broken down a little bit differently, but you have the choice, and if you listen, you have these good things. And it enumerates it. There you have preservation, deliverance, life, health, glory, honor. On the other hand, disregard and don't listen, and you have these negative things. You have being just continually preoccupied with evil, not being able to sleep until you have that evil that's done, until you're able to accomplish, whatever bad thing that you're trying to do. There's violence, there's hindrance, there's stumbling, there's darkness. So kind of, for me, as I was going through it, that's kind of what stood out to me as encompassing in this chapter. Whenever I was reading through it, it kind of stood out to me as kind of 5 different categories, I guess. At the start, you have the writer giving an admonition to the listeners, to his audience, and then it talks about the pathway of wisdom, followed by the pathway of wickedness or darkness. And you have kind of a summary of the two, and then you have again the writer's admonition with some more practical advice. So, read the first 9 verses. Somebody read verse 1 through 5, and then somebody pick up different the rest of it through 9.
Hear my children, the instruction of the Father. Pay attention to know understanding. For I give you good doctrine. Do not forsake my law. When I was my father's son, tender and the only one in the sight of my mother, he also taught me and said to me, let your heart retain my words. Keep my commands and live. Get wisdom, get understanding. Do not forget, and turn away from the words of my mouth.
Do not forsake her, and she will preserve you. Love her, and she will keep you. Wisdom is the principal thing, therefore get wisdom. And in all your getting, get understanding. Exalt her, and she will promote you. She will bring you honor when you embrace her. She will place on your head an ornament of grace, a crown of glory she delivers.
Thank you for reading that. So, this first section here, verses 1 through 9, who's talking? Okay. The first few verses says, hear, my children, the instructions of the Father, and give attention to know understanding, for I give you good doctrine. Do not forsake my law. When I was my father's son, tender and the only one in the sight of my mother, he also taught me and said to me." Who's talking right there? Probably Solomon, right? Who is, he's talking in this part right here, but then in just a minute he's going to be quoting David, right? What David said to him. What is Solomon saying in this section right here, this first part? Isn't he saying, listen, this is what, whenever I was young, when I was little, this is what my dad told me. Now I'm going to pass it on to you. Now I'm going to tell you what he told me. The New American Standard, I like its translation of that, where, it says, "I give to you sound teaching. Do not abandon my instruction." I think it kind of brings more of the idea of, these things that are being laid out are instructions or guideline. Another translation for instruction could be direction. The Hebrew word is actually Torah, which is what we call the Pentateuch, first 5 books of the Law of Moses. So it's kind of like what Solomon is saying to them is going to be, New King James translates it as law, but it's what is going to be set out for them to follow. It's the guideline, the path for them to follow. It's the wisdom of the words for them to follow, to give the good things, the good benefits that he's going to go on to talk about. Here where it talks about, this is getting into David's admonition or David's advice to Solomon. But we see in this chapter, we have 5 different times of where we have that, hear my children, keep my words, keep my commands, don't forget, don't turn away, hear my son, hear my son. The first one was Solomon. Now we have these 2 from David, and then it's going to go back to Solomon. But, Solomon is writing out what David said to him for us to read. What is David saying to Solomon? What advice would you say, or summarize what it is that David said to Solomon?
Exert all your energy in getting wisdom, because it's going to make life a lot better for you.
Okay. Get wisdom. What else? Not only wisdom. Get wisdom and understanding. Exactly. Understanding, to me, whenever I see understanding, I interchange it with discernment. It's another way of saying that same word, but it's, it talks about, understanding and discernment, it's basically like you can be told how something is done, kind of like what Jeremiah was saying, like you can read a textbook on medical stuff, but it doesn't make you a doctor. Kind of on the same lines, like you can be told facts, you can be told how something is done, but until you actually do it or understand it or dive into it, it's not the same. And so, really, it's almost like the kind of working definition of wisdom is knowledge applied, right? Discernment is almost kind of like wisdom applied. Like you're taking the fact, you're taking what you know, and discernment is basically for example, knowing, what to say. That's the wisdom. But discernment is knowing how to say it or when to say it. Or the same thing with, doing something. You can know how to do it. But discernment or understanding would be knowing the best time or the best way of going about making that done. Does anybody have any comments up to this point?
Think about when Philip over
it's almost kind of like yes, exactly. Being explained and understanding and applying what it is that you know. It's putting it into action. So David's advice, get wisdom, get understanding. Wisdom is the principal thing, therefore get wisdom, and all you're getting, get understanding. Like that is, how many different times, big flashing lights, how many different times, how many different ways can he say that? Did Solomon do that? What do you think?
Not later in his life. Not later in his life.
Not entirely, not his whole life. Good.
Not later
Yep.
when he married the foreign wives.
Mhm. So maybe starting out, maybe he did. Somebody turn over to 1 Kings 3 and read 12 and 13.
Three to 13.
12 and 13. Yeah, 3, 12 and 13.
Behold, I have done according to your words. See, I have given you a wise and understanding heart, so that there has not been anyone like you before you, nor shall any like you arise after you. And I have also given you what you have not asked, both riches and honor, so that there shall not be anyone like you among kings all your days.
Thank you. So this is God talking to Solomon, right? We all know the story. God comes to Solomon and says, what is it that you want? And Solomon asks for wisdom. And so God, as Carl just read, says, I'm going to give you wisdom. But also, since you didn't ask for these things, I'm going to give you these things as well. And that's kind of the point. Somebody read a little bit earlier in that chapter 5 through 10.
At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night, and God said, ask, what shall I give you? And Solomon said, you have shown great mercy to your servant David my father, because he walked before you in truth and righteousness and in uprightness of heart with you. You have continued to show kindness for him, and you have given him a son to sit on his throne, as it is to this day. Now, O Lord my God, you have made your servant king instead of my father David, but I am a little child. I do not know how to go out or come in. And your servant is in the midst of your people, whom you have chosen, a great people, too numerous to be numbered or counted. Therefore give to your servant an understanding heart to judge your people, that I may discern between good and evil. For who is able to judge this great people of yours? The speech pleased the Lord that Solomon had asked him this thing.
Thank you, Tyler. So I would agree with what Rick was saying is starting out, Solomon he did listen to David. When he was given the opportunity, when it was presented to him, he took advantage of it. How did he do that? It's not a trick question.
He just asked for wisdom.
He asked. God asked, what do you want? And he's like, okay, this is my chance, this is my opportunity. This is what I was instilled. This is what was given to me as being the most important. That's what I'm going to ask for. And he did. Can anybody think of some new or some scriptural, some other passages that revolve around asking God for things?
Asking shall be given unto you.
Okay. Yeah.
James chapter 1.
Good. That's one I thought of. James chapter 1 and verse 5. Here, you want to read that for us? Somebody else could turn to Matthew 7:7.
James 1:5. Many of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him.
Thank you.
Matthew 7:7, ask and it will be given to you, seek and you will find, knock and it will be open to you.
That's what Carl said. So Solomon asked, and it was granted. James tells us to ask. Jesus tells us, if you ask, that verse in Proverbs there is one that James probably talked about, but that source of wisdom being from God. who gives without, with liberality. Very good. So we have kind of a recap. We have Solomon saying, "Listen to me." These are the things that David said. Pointed out that Solomon listened, at least at the beginning. Well, so this is David's summary of benefits that he says, you listen to my words, keep these words, and this is what will come from it. Do not forsake her, and she will preserve you. Love her, she will keep you. Exalt her, she will promote you. Embrace her, she will bring you honor. She will bestow grace to you. She will deliver a crown of glory to you. How will doing what David says, he says, follow me, follow my words, listen to me. How do you get these benefits from that? So get wisdom, get understanding. How is it when you get those wisdom and understanding that you get these benefits?
These are like the fruits of that life.
Good. Using what you have learned, using that wisdom, using that understanding can get you these things. Will preserve you, will keep you. Well, from a practical standpoint, if you're using wisdom, you're not going to be doing risky things, dangerous things that will potentially cut your life short or severely decrease your ability to live. So from a practical standpoint, using that wisdom, using that understanding will get you these things, will promote you, well, maybe just keeping your mouth shut, right? Will help you to not only give you the grace and the glory, but, just being able to know what to say, when to say it, what to do, when to do it, using the things will, almost can't help but get these things to you. Question number 2 that we had at the end of the chapter kind of addresses this, where she will bring you honor and will bestow grace to you. Anybody have any thoughts on that question? Get to it. Where it says, how are honor and grace created by wisdom? There.
Well, I think it's just by its nature, wisdom will do that. You can see what it did for Solomon. Having great wisdom, he excelled all the rulers of all the world in his time, and just from an earthly standpoint, but also from a heavenly standpoint, if you embrace wisdom from God, it will also, you'll be exalted before the eyes of God for being wise and making wise spiritual decisions. So that's just by its nature, wisdom will do that for you, even if it's a temporal thing, like happened to Solomon more or less. But he became extremely wealthy, extremely powerful, and just in his that's what wisdom did for him, as opposed to foolishness.
Scott?
And people would come from miles around to hear his wisdom, and to ask questions and see all of his glory and everything. And if you have the knowledge and the wisdom of the Lord and you act that away and purvey that out to others and live the life you're supposed to live, as you get older, people start coming to you and asking you questions, about things, and that's when you have the opportunity to teach them about the Lord or purvey why, things have gone for you the way they have. That's where the honor will come in. And then, of course, grace is, we all get that as long as we serve the Lord.
Yes. Thank you both for those comments. Having wisdom and discernment, especially seems like in today's time, is such against, like, I don't know, it stands out, right? There's like some pull or magnet to, like Scott was saying, like somebody who is conducting themselves with wisdom, with integrity, with, all the right things. Like it draws people to them and presents opportunities in turn to talk about the Bible, talk about Jesus. I mean, it gives those opportunities, but it makes you stand out. I mean, like there's really, I don't know another way of saying it, but it's just counterculture, I guess. I mean, like there's so much silliness and weird stuff going on that it stands out. Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, to kind of follow along with what you're saying, if we read along and further along in that 1 Kings chapter 3, we find the example of Solomon employing that wisdom that he had gotten from God. Yep. And when the women came to him and about the child that was dead, and it's interesting because after that's all done, and he applied that wisdom, the last verse there, 28, says, all Israel heard of the judgment which the king had rendered, and they feared the king, for they saw that the wisdom of God was in him to administer justice. So he took the wisdom that God had given him and he applied it. Just like if we take the wisdom that we get and we apply that, then people look at us and say, hey, maybe these people know what they're talking about. Maybe he knows what he's talking about. And doing that will glorify God.
Yes, very good.
Well, he's right, and with that, you want people to say, I want what he's got. What is it he's got? And I don't mean that in a material type way, and
There's something different.
that is correct. And and hopefully they will see that there is something different about us, everybody in this room.
Something different, and that's what we'll talk about in a minute. It's that light, that light that's
right.
in us, right?
Jeremiah wants to say something.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I think everything that everyone's saying is encapsulated in the concept of Titus 2, I believe verse 9 or 10, where he talks about how we're to be adorning the doctrine of God. So when we're adorned, we're given the ornament of grace, and we're bestowed with honor and glory. It's really actually because we understand that it's from God. It's not putting a focus on ourselves. It's actually putting a focus on the life-changing power of the gospel. And so when they do ask us, what's your secret? It's not me, it's Christ. And that, it makes the gospel attractive. If you can't interest them enough to sit down over a Bible with you, because it doesn't resonate with them. Why would I want to study this ancient text? Then what they will be attracted to is, that guy's got something going on in his life that's right. And then you bring it back to the text. And so that's the pattern of bringing glory to God by our works, is letting the gospel change us and then pointing people to the changing power.
Great point. Okay, we got to move on. I am dreadfully behind. So, we move from Solomon saying what David told him to now Solomon moving on with his admonition to listen, and gets into his start of his advice. Verse 10 through 13. Somebody want to read that?
Hear my son, and receive my sayings, and the years of your life will be many. I have taught you in the way of wisdom, I have led you in the right paths. When you walk, your steps will not be hindered, and when you run, you will not stumble. Take firm hold of instruction, do not let go, keep her, for she is your life.
Thank you. So we have Solomon's assessment of the path of wisdom, and then in just a few verses going to be his assessment of the path of wickedness. But this is Solomon saying, here, receive my sayings. I taught you in the way of wisdom. I led you in the right paths, and this is the benefits that you're going to get from it. When you walk, your steps will not be hindered. When you run, you will not stumble. Take firm hold of the instructions and don't let go, for they are your life. flip side, do not enter on the path of wickedness. Do not walk in the way of evil. Avoid it. Do not travel on it. Turn away from it and pass on. For these people who follow that path, they do not sleep unless they have done evil, and their sleep is taken away unless they make someone fall. For they eat the bread of wickedness and drink the wine of violence. It's interesting here. His advice is to actively, not like actively go away from or go towards good, but actively avoid going towards evil. I don't know if I said that right, but I mean, when you look here, do not enter, do not walk, avoid it, do not travel, turn away, pass on. I mean, like, it is very specific of like paying attention and making an effort of avoiding going down that path of evil. And tells you why. I mean, these people, that's what I had on that slide earlier, like, they're just preoccupied with their evil. They don't sleep unless they make someone, they don't sleep unless they've done evil. Their sleep is taken away unless they make someone fall. Like, it's just, it consumes them. It's just all consuming to them. And that's where, once you, and that's Solomon's point, is actively avoid going down that path, because this is where it's going to end up.
I think it shows you the progressive nature of sin, and really, part of retaining, like you said, wisdom is to avoid evil. But I mean, a person that's getting all this wisdom and receiving the benefits, like we've been talking about, may in a moment of weakness and temptation take one step. It's just one time, but actually, the instruction to avoid it at all costs is part of this positive wisdom, because it's never one step. It always has consequences. It always takes you further than you want to go, and it's going to complete, like you said, consume you. You think it's one uncharacteristic thing that I'm going to have fun in, but next thing you know, that's who you are. You're just an evil, wicked person. All you're doing is thinking about these things and making plans for them as well.
Well, and that's kind of that turn away from it and pass on. I mean, like, you cannot pass on if you decide, I'm just going to try a little bit. I'm just going to take a step down there. Like, that's not passing on. And exactly your point, the wisdom of that is don't even start down it at all. Just keep going. All right. That stumbling in darkness we'll talk about soon, but that comes from verse 19 on the list there, which we'll talk about now. Verse 18 and 19. So this is kind of, to me when I was reading this, is like, okay, so we had Solomon talk about these two paths, and then he just kind of summarizes it in verse 18 and 19. Will somebody read that for me real quick?
But the path of the just is like the shining sun that shines ever brighter into the perfect day. The way of the wicked is like darkness. They do not know what makes them stumble.
Thank you. I like the New American Standard translation of this as well. But the path of the righteous is like the light of dawn that shines brighter and brighter until full day. That kind of makes, I don't know, to me makes more sense as far as like that path of wisdom, starting on that path of wisdom is leading towards the brighter end of, obviously, God and heaven, right? I mean, so it's that starting on that path is always going towards that brighter way, as opposed to the way of the wicked is darkness. Talked about this recently at a Bible study, but light and darkness we see throughout the entire Bible. It's in the New King James, light is used 221 times, darkness 141 times. I was just going through quickly and picked out a few that kind of stood out to me. We don't have time to read them all, but somebody turn over and read Genesis 1, that first one, Genesis 1, 2 through 5. Somebody else turn over to John 1, 4 through 5 and 9. And then one other is do that 1 John 1, 5.
The earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. So the evening and the morning were the first day.
Thank you. John 1, 4 through 5, and then verse 9.
In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. And then verse 9. The true light, which gives light to everyone, was coming into the world.
Talking about Jesus, right? Okay, and then 1 John 1, verse 5.
This is the message we have heard from him and announced to you, that God is light, and in him there is no darkness at all.
Thank you. All right, so talking a lot about light and darkness, right? God created it almost right at the very first thing. He created the heavens and earth, but then the second thing was created light and created and separated the light from the darkness. And then, as Dallas read, that's the first part of John, Jesus was the life and the light that came down for all men. And then this, that Nevin read, that God is light and in him is no darkness. What's the point? God created light and separated from darkness. That's something that we can physically experience, right? We can go into a dark room, not know where we're going, flip on a light, and be able to see. It is impossible to have both light and darkness at the same time. Where you have light, you cannot have darkness. You know, we read about and talk about you can't have a blemish. Like we have to be spotless, right? And not have a blemish and to be pure and holy. And that's all true. That's all right. I think it's easier to say, or for me to think about, well, having that worldliness, that's darkness. We can't have darkness in us and light in us at the same time. It doesn't work that way. It's 100%. It's all one or all the other in God's eyes. And as Nevin read, God is light, and in him is no darkness. And so ultimately, in the end, to be in heaven, we can't have any darkness. It's impossible to be in the presence of God, who is light, and for there to be any darkness.
Well, I think that, our hang-up on that sometimes is, well, if that's true, I know I sinned 2 weeks ago. I know I've sinned since I've been baptized, so how does that work with me? And that's what growth looks like. But growth isn't tolerance of sin. I think the text actually gives an excellent picture of growth. When he says in verse 14, don't even enter that. That's like, okay, I'm going to take a step, but it's not going to go any further than that. But it takes you a lot further. But when he says in verse 18 about the shining sun, it's speaking of from dawn until the noonday when it's the brightest. And if you parallel that right up with verse 19, you've got dawn that starts off and dusk that ends the day. And those two, other than the position of the sun, are very similar. It's about the same kind of light. The difference is, one, it's only going to get brighter. You're only going to grow further if you're pursuing wisdom. And the other, it's only going to get darker, and you're not even going to know what happened. And so, it's both a warning but also an encouragement. Listen, now you don't know a lot now, and you're struggling with this now, but if you relentlessly pursue this and trust in God's grace, you're going to get to that noonday. It's going to happen. There's no question about it. You just got to trust in that process.
That's a great point. It's the progression, it's the progress, it's the striving towards, like Paul, like emulate me as I emulate Christ, like striving to be as much like Christ as we can.
I think too, when you're talking about spiritual things and darkness, just look at the life of Adam and Eve. One little sin, eating the forbidden fruit, they thought that was Eve thought it was a good idea. It would make me wise. Well, look at the consequences. Just one time, if she never sinned the rest of her life, that one sin was a cascading effect in her life and everybody else's life up to today. So it's sin and staying away from darkness is a real serious admonition.
Yes, and I may not have portrayed it the way I wanted to, but the point of having darkness in you is, like Jeremiah is saying, like, I hate the saying of, like, well, we're human, so we sin. Like, it's almost like it's a crutch, like, oh, can't help from it. Well, I mean, yes, Romans 3:23, all have sinned. Doesn't mean all have sinned every single day. I mean, like, first time that you sin, you complete that. I mean, that fulfills that passage. But from that point on, we are trying to live every single day, every single minute, the way God wants us to, and to not have any darkness in us. Now, if something comes up, then you repent of that, right? You change that, so that way you don't have that. You are forgiven of that darkness and blemish that's in you. And yes, David.
Well, when you step back and look at it, there's two paths. We need to understand that. You're on one of them.
Yep. Yes. Good point.
I think one thing that we can gain out of this particular lesson is the wisdom that's being taught to us through Proverbs is a causal effect. Yes, we gain some knowledge, and whatever we do, we gain knowledge. But there's a causal effect. Even Paul, talking to the Colossians in the first chapter, Epaphras, I can't say the name right, but Epaphras, he was teaching them. He was a servant of God, and he was teaching them. And Paul went on to mention that you keep doing this and keep gaining knowledge and spiritual understanding. He says that in verse 9. And then later on, he also says that you may walk worthy of the Lord, fully pleasing Him, being fruitful in every good work, increasing in knowledge of God. So there's a causal effect in this wisdom. It's not just something that you gain, that you have innately because you've learned it. But there's something causal about it that causes you to change continually. It doesn't stop. And I think that's, even the author, he doesn't directly say it, but I think that's what he was trying to get across to us in this particular chapter.
Yes,
But
quickly.
just real quickly, to that point, the verse that keeps in my head today is faith comes by hearing and hearing by the word of God. Faith is not the principal thing. I think that sometimes we might think that, but scripturally, from what we've heard today, wisdom is the principal thing. Faith comes by hearing. Hearing what? Wisdom. Wisdom of what? Wisdom of God. And I love the idea that Jeremiah said it's a process. And sometimes I think we forget that it is a process in learning and going through life. And when we do sin, the process of getting right with God and having then that wisdom to get right with God will get us back to the light.
Good point. And as David said, there are two paths. You're on one or the other. You can't be on both. And wisdom would be recognizing which path that you're on. If you're not on the right path, figuring out how to get on to the right path. Okay, so very quickly as we finish up here, the last section here, verses 20 through 27 is, again, Solomon's admonition again, and then some practical advice. So, my son, give attention to my words, incline your ears to my saying. Do not let them depart from your eyes. Keep them in the midst of your heart. For they are life to those who find them and health to all their flesh. Keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it springs the issues of life. Other translations, guard your heart, watch over your heart. Why is that important? Why is it when he says, keep my words, do these things, their life, guard your heart? Keep your heart.
What he explains in the lesson, the heart is, it involves the intellect, the will, the volition, and the motion. Volition, will, again, the same. And so that's, if wisdom appeals to my intellect and my will and drives my emotions, then my heart is what I need to be guarding.
Good. It's the kind of ground zero, right? It's the start of that, choosing that path. Solomon tells you, guard your heart. This is how you do it. guarding your speech, guarding your eyes, and your steps. Put away a deceitful mouth. Put perverse lips far away from you. Let your eyes look straight ahead. Let your eyelids look right before you. Ponder the path of your feet. Let all your ways be established. Don't turn to the right or turn to the left. Gives you practical advice on what to do. Guard your eyes. Pay attention. Focus on what it is that you're looking at, on what you're doing, where you're going, what you're saying. There's that, I don't know, I think it's computer talk where garbage in, garbage out, right? What is going in is going to be what's coming out. What's coming out of our mouths. How are we talking? What are we talking about?
I think one of the common, also the foolish things we say is, oh, that won't affect me. And we expose ourselves to evil. If you don't catch it over time.
Wisdom would say that's not true. Very good. Thank you very much for your participation.